So that way, as folks join in, they hopefully won't miss too much. So good evening, everybody. I am Captain Sam Somersinger with the Truman Composite Squadron and your Missouri Wing Glider Program Coordinator. Tonight, we've got Captain Bruce Meacham, is also with the Truman Composite Squadron, who is going to be doing a presentation for us on how to become a glider tow pilot. The presentation is going to be somewhat generic in nature, as in it's how to become a tow pilot, period. And then towards the end, I'll kind of cover how to become a CAP tow pilot. We've got FAA requirements that are pretty easy to meet, and then you got CAP requirements that take a little more planning and time. So with that, we will get the show on the road.
Welcome to Triangle North Executive Airport. We're going to conduct glider operations today. My name is Major Donahue, and I'll be conducting your safety briefing. We're going to be on the other side of the main hard surface runway. We'll be on the grass runway. So that's a runway. An aircraft can approach and land on that runway at any time. So we have to have excellent situational awareness. We have to have our head on a swivel while we're out there. We're flying people's children in an aircraft that doesn't have an engine, and it is very, very serious business. And our glider pilots are excellent, and they have excellent skill, decision making. They're super safety conscious. They understand that this is a big responsibility, and this is challenging flying.
Triangle North traffic, be advised, Capt. Plane glider occupy runway 23 for the next 1 minute, Triangle North. Our traffic, Capt. Plane glider on the roll, runway 23, Triangle North.
Flying the glider is a pinnacle activity in Civil Air Patrol. It's not a common occurrence to be able to fly in a glider, and the fact that we have been given the privilege of having a glider that is available and we have a great airspace to use it in, I just encourage people to take advantage of that.
Triangle North traffic, Capt. Gliders coming out up to runway 23 is landing in the grass.
So basically, that is why we have a glider program in Missouri. Our goal is to try to get our cadets flying. They, in addition to their 5 powered orientation flights, they get 5 glider flights. And in order to support that program, there is a need for glider tow pilots. And so this is part of the training that we will be doing, or at least an introduction to how to become a glider tow pilot. Just to give you another quick video, here's one from an activity that we did last weekend. This is, I'm actually the tow pilot on this particular tow. 833 Charlie Pups, the aircraft in front. This is 419 Bravo Alpha in the rear at Richter Airport. and we were on our way to a 3,000-foot AGL tow. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Bruce Meacham, who is, as I mentioned, a member of the Harriet Truman Composite Squadron. Bruce is a CFI, CFII, CFI-G, a tow pilot, and a tow pilot trainer. So he is probably the most qualified person I've got to teach this course. So thank you very much for your time. Captain Meacham, it is all yours.
Thank you very much. Great introduction. You forgot MEI. I can do many engines, one engine, and no engines. I'm any one of those. All right. So so the main purpose of this, we're just going to kind of go over some of the basics around tow piloting and what it means to do kind of that question you always get from a powered pilot that hears about gliding is, can I tow? And it's nice because we always want to have tow pilots. And there's some things that kind of are good general, and this is more of the presentation style is not, literally what are the requirements to become a tow pilot or who is looking for a tow pilot. It's what is it like and what are the things you need to watch out for and how do you train to be the best, safest tow pilot that that you can possibly be and that's out there, because we want safe tow pilots, we want good tow pilots, and it just doesn't mean you have to have 5,000 hours of experience. That's really not what we're looking for. There's a minimum of 100 hours now. I'm not too opposed to that. I think that's a reasonable floor for a tow pilot. That the skill is not a huge. We don't require much more skill beyond what you can do as a regular powered pilot, private pilot. But there's a few things that we want to make sure that you're a solid pilot that knows what they're doing and can kind of look through things, and it's really about having a good practical understanding of flying. So let's see. So first of all, one thing to recognize that what the activity we're doing, this gliding activity, it is a lot of fun. There's a lot of interesting things. If you're thinking about this from this perspective of a tow pilot, you definitely should look at it from the other end of the rope. This is not just about towing other people up. You should get out there and do it yourself because it's a lot of fun. When the first time you find a thermal on your own and you look down at the altimeter and it's going up and it's like, wow, this is all free. You will have an elation that is hard to beat. There's very few things that will beat it. It's a very cool feeling when the first few times you do that, and quite frankly, it never really goes away. I still get it to this day, when I find a thermal. So as far as what we're going to cover here today, we're going to talk about some ground stuff, we're going to talk about some basic stuff, and we're going to talk about some experience stuff. First of all, the basics. Number one, this goes for all flying. So this isn't like a totally different kind of checklist, but number one is, I'm safe. As a tow pilot, this isn't just like, I think I could, this is kind of like I'm safe for a cross country, or I'm safe for a full day of flying. That's going to be fatiguing. That's going to have a lot of you're very likely going to be at least a little dehydrated, hopefully not, but at some point in the day, it's going to get hot. You're going to be tired. And you want to say to yourself, every point in the day, am I safe? Right. So that's the standard I'm safe, just like we do for everything else in flying. Pre-flight and first flight. So pre-flighting the glide, you pre-flight a tow plane just like you pre-flight any other powered airplane. No difference whatsoever. The only thing you do extra is you do test the release on the tow plane. So we hook up the rope once, then pull on it, and if it releases, good. You've tested it. That's the only additional item that's on the checklist. Before the first flight of the day, there's a safety briefing with CAP every day. That's just how we operate. So we get everybody who's around that's operating at that time. Not everybody. Some people do come and go during the day, especially with O-rides. But the folks that are there, they're going to operate. We do that first safety briefing in the morning. Talk about what is the operation going to look like, what direction are the winds coming from, what are the risk factors. Kind of go through all of that in a standard kind of formal, semi-formal kind of group, and saying this is what we're going to cover today. That also generally includes any of the club only members who are also there. We include everybody because it's not just us that are operating, right? So we talk about checklists as well. When you're flying as a tow pilot, You know, the first flight of the day, there is a checklist. You just do the checklist like you normally do for any other aircraft. But then as you get into the day, you also want to do things like periodically do some MAG checks, periodically do some quick, check your altimeter. You might be off a little bit. Always, every flight you want to check the fuel gauges, or in the case of our tow pilot, our tow plane, it doesn't have a very good fuel gauge. You just kind of want to keep track of, on the tow sheet, we keep track of when you fueled last. You really don't want that to get much more than 10. If it's more than 10, you want to know exactly how much fuel you have left. So 10 from a full tanks to 10 tows is about 2/3 of the gas, give or take.
That's on the club tow plane though.
Correct. On the CAP tow planes, the gas gauges work awesome. So you know right where you are, and we don't fly with full tanks typically. I haven't done a whole lot of towing with our 182, but what I have towed with it, it's we usually use. I think we start the day in the 50. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we have to relocate it from Lee Summit, so typically that'll be lower, but 50 is where we start.
Whatever, if it's 40, that's fine too. Like you don't want to be 5. Like that's you want to have your minimums. You still have to have VFR minimums. Don't ever exceed those ever. CAP minimums as well. Don't ever exceed those. So those are very basic minimums. So VFR minimums for the 150, CAP minimums for the 182. So signals, we do have a specific set of signals. Radios are encouraged but not required. We do operate from a field which is just for gliding. So Richter Airfield is a private airstrip. The priority operations of that airport is gliding. The radios are encouraged but not required. And what that means is if we have them, we need to use them. Not everybody has them. Many gliders don't have a radio on them. We can carry handhelds and any radio we want, obviously, but handhelds are only so good. It's good for communicating when there's not a lot of noise surrounding you. They're good for communicating when you're on the ground, but when you get in the air and the cabin noise is, it's pretty loud inside of a glider. One of the misnomers, people think it's going to be silent. It's on silent wings, right? That's a really good book about World War II glider combat, but they're not. It's not that silent. Not inside the cockpit. It's loud. It's not loud enough that you need a headset, but it is loud enough that you need to talk at a very elevated voice. No doubt about it. So when you're in the cockpit with a handheld, it can be tough. And it's hard to hear people. Communication really kind of breaks down. So we do have signals for critical situations on the ground in particular. So we'll talk a little bit about signaling, but not a lot. That's kind of more in depth as we get into the actual, here's how it works. When you're out there on the field, we will show you the signals. As you do the different checks that are required, the tests, we'll talk about signals that you'll need to know. And typically, even in that safety briefing in the morning, we'll go over we'll usually go over 1 or 2 of the signals, and we'll kind of pick a different set every time to keep everybody there, even the old hands who've been around forever doing it. And gliders, because there's no medical requirement, we generally can get an older audience of pilots. Read into that what you want, but it's not a bad thing. They're still great pilots. There's nothing wrong with them. But we do have a lot of older pilots. So getting them to kind of rethink about, hey, what are you going to do if you're 4 miles away and you're 2,000 feet? What do you like? Things like that. We do a lot of that kind of scenarios with everybody all the time. Glider and the tow pilots, same thing. You're a tow pilot, you're on downwind, you're going to turn base, and you see a glider underneath you coming in to land. What do you do? Right? We do a lot of that kind of stuff. And what that really is, by the way, the answer is put the power in and go around. Let the glider land. So we do a lot of that kind of stuff. We actually just had a meeting, an annual kind of beginning spring meeting with the MSA group a couple days ago, and Ron Leonard, the chief instructor pilot there, gave that, and it was been an excellent job. Really, really quite good. Encourage it for anybody. So we found out, hey, we want to be a tow pilot, and I think for the most part, everybody wants to think that this is the picture of a tow pilot. This guy, he's got it all together. He's got this great big machine, and it's super fast. It's got a lot of horsepower, all this horsepower, and it's all very cool. Well, the reality is it's more like this. So, you know, you've taken this really high horsepower airplane that can climb at, you know, 1,000 feet per minute, and if you're low gas in a tow plane, you know, and you put the nose up, it goes way up because it's got a lot of power and it's very light. But when you're carrying 700, 800,000 pounds of glider behind you, it's very draggy. It gets kind of slow and pokey, and it's, you know, the other thing is, as a glider, as a tow pilot itself, you know, it's hot. It's very hot. You're always hot. You know, we typically operate on every day. I mean, I think even when it's been really bad, we still go out. So I don't remember a day we said, no, we're not going, it's too hot. I don't think I don't remember it. When it is hot, we do prepare. Sam likes to bring out a big canopy for people, which is awesome. We do have water, lots of water. Water's everywhere. Bottled water. You know, we encourage everyone to make sure you bring at least a gallon of water on those hot days. And we do go over that on the safety briefing as well. So the other thing is that the grass can get tall, it can get slow. In the mind, you're thinking, well, when did we fuel again? I can't remember. You know, I've been flying a lot. I can't remember how much. When did we fuel? I can't remember. And then remember that, you know, that the plane itself is, you know, it's just dragging this huge amount of weight behind it. It's just slow. So I'm going to go over kind of some of the normal procedures next. So when we talk about some of the kind of the basic ones, and I want to make sure we see some of the basic ones. Stop engine, right? Just like you normally do, cut it. You know, and then halt this is what we do, and it's halt, stop. Either one of these is fine. You know, we know what it means, but you know, like we need to stop everything and see what's going on. I'm going to show a quick video of kind of just a basic operation from beginning to end, a normal aero tow. This was provided by somebody who came out and did a demo ride and posted it on YouTube. And so I don't even know who this guy is, but it was a great video, so I keep using it and I like it a lot. So we'll kind of show this video from beginning to end. Volume is a little low on it. Sorry about that.
This is the Midwestern Soaring Association's Schweitzer 222, and that's a Cessna 150 with a 150 horsepower engine in it. Again,
so what this gentleman here is doing, his name's Mike Ketterman. He's hooking up the glider right now. He's hooked it up. And the pilot who's in the back, the person in the front is getting the kind of the fun ride, the demo ride. The pilot in the back is a CAP member. He's actually the one that flew the yellow glider that we saw in the other video. His name is Mike Haynes. So he's kind of talking through right now, and you can't hear it, but he's talking through. You see, he just did his flight controls. He's doing a checklist. The checklist is actually, I'll pause it for a second. This right here, can you guys see my screen right here? We actually placard the airplane with a checklist right there. So the left side is takeoff. The right side is any issues or warnings, things to watch out for. And then I think in here is landing. Landing is real short. It's U-stall. And so now the wing is level. You notice that the glider's level. Mike over here, Mike Ketterman, he's signaling by putting his hands down. That means take up slack. One of our signals. The tow plane is now pulling forward and taking up the slack in the rope. Okay, and now you're going to see he's going to start putting his arm all the way around like a windmill. That means we're ready to go. So he's already, Mike, they got the wing runner on the outside. He's already looked around to make sure there's no traffic. You know, we're always looking for traffic. He's looked around. He's looking at the rudder of the glider. When the rudder, we use a wing wag as well. That tells everybody the glider is ready to go. And then the final step is that the tow pilot will copy that wag real quick to say, yep, I'm going to go in a second. Give me a moment. Then you make your radio call, you know, Cessna 12345, glider on tow, departing runway 17 or 18 in this case. And then you go. The glider takes off first. So I probably didn't notice this here. The glider takes off first. It's because the gliders have much lower wing loading. They will get in the air way before the tow plane will. So your job as the glider is to stay behind him and don't go up high. Like if you go up high, the tow plane's gonna get stuck in the mud. So you'll see that the glider's gonna take off first, right about here. Okay, and he's gonna, now the tow plane's gonna take off, and he makes an immediate right turn. And you can't hear it, but Mike is doing a great job of broadcasting what he's doing and when he's doing what. So he's talking about things like what happens if the rope breaks.
Okay.
So he just asked him, you don't do a lot with your rudders, and that's, if you're doing it right, there's not a lot to do. But if you're also doing it right, there's these little subtle things. Like the point is, you'll notice that the nose is staying right on the tow plane, right? And his bank angle, and you can't tell this from the video so easily, but in my own mind, because I've done this so much, I know what he's doing. His wings are aligned with the wings of the tow plane all the time. So the kind of the rule of thumb here is take your wings and align them with, make your wings in terms of bank always match the tow plane. And then to make sure you're laterally aligned with the tow plane, you use rudder. There's your rudder. But he's doing a good job, so you don't even notice it. But I guarantee you those rudder pedals are moving.
And this tow is taking place at about 65 miles an hour.
Correct. Yep. The airspeed indicator's right here. It's very hard to read, and it's not very accurate anyway.
Yeah, so that goes back to what Bruce said.
Like 5-10 knots.
That's what Bruce goes back to what Bruce said about, we're always flying, we're slow. It's like, yeah, we have a lot of power, we can go a lot faster, but our max aero tow speed for like the Bladdock is only 81 knots, and we don't want to tow that fast because it doesn't give the glider pilot much safety margin.
And you remember when I was talking about how it's not very, like it's loud? On tow is almost the loudest time because you're going the fastest. And believe it or not, the 222, which is this airplane, it's the Schweitzer 222. It's very loud. It's an old, it's a tube and fabric airplane that was, believe it or not, it was built in the late 60s, but it looks like it was built in the 20s. It's a great airplane. Not this model, but previous models were used to train glider pilots during World War II from Schweitzer. This model was built later, and they just kept building that same kind of idea, and they made it a little bit better and a little bigger, and came out with the 222 and the 233. But you get the idea.
So the FAA does require tow pilots to get some glider training. It does not mandate a minimum, but it does require that all tow pilots, before they are signed off to tow, do get some time on this end of the rope as well. So that is a requirement as well, where you are seeing the signals, you're seeing how the flight takes place. Typically, we do at least 2 or 3 flights, show you what a rope break looks like, and just kind of get you a very brief introduction to what it is like to fly a glider.
Correct. And one thing you'll notice is that we're basically flying over the airport. Maybe it's not real obvious here. That's the airport right there, right? And so we're just basically doing a big box pattern over the airport, going on both sides of downwinds, left and right, kind of, because we're above the traffic pattern at this point, right? So the idea being we're not getting too far away. He's flying, you'll notice this pilot in the tow plane is flying nice and gentle, really gentle turns, no more than 20 degrees, 30 if you know that the pilot behind you is capable. But I really recommend that it's about 20, which is there is actually a turn and bank indicator, and I just use the doghouse. It's the old style doghouse one, but just use the doghouse because that's the safest way to know you've got a nice gentle turn.
Flying 65 knots or 65 miles an hour with the 150 is a lot easier than flying it with the 182. So we do fly our tows a little faster with the 182 because you're typically you've got 1 notch of flaps in both aircraft. You're flying the 65 to 70 knots, and typically we're flying on turbulent days. So every once in a while that stall horn will go off. And you're pretty active on the rudders of the tow plane.
Yeah, absolutely. You're on the climb out takes about, I don't know, maybe 5 pounds of right rudder all the time. And I can see when a tow pilot isn't using their feet. It's very obvious because it goes through the air like, it's hard to, let me see if I can visualize this. So like, let's say that's normal, like you're expecting, that's the plane normal. It'll actually be sideways and you can actually see it. You can see it going sideways through the air. He's doing a good job. That's straight on.
It's a little easier with the Cap 182 because we do actually have rudder trim. So that makes life a lot more pleasant for the tow pilot.
Yep. Because the way down, it's the opposite. You need left rudder.
Yep. And we're typically towing for training flights up to 2,000 foot AGL. For orientation flights, we'll tow to 3,000 or 3,500 AGL, depending on the conditions of the day. When we did the orientation flights a couple of weekends ago, we surprisingly had some really good soaring conditions, and we had, out of our 6 rides, 4 of them were 30 minutes long off of a tow to 3,000 feet. So they could have stayed up longer. They just came down because we had more cadets waiting.
Yeah, I was laughing because the guy just looked back at himself and you could hear his lip sync and saying, "This is awesome." It is a lot of fun. What I'm waiting for now is just the kind of, hopefully we'll see this, the tow release, and we'll kind of go over some of the procedures around the tow release. That the tow plane is going to go to the left, the glider is going to go to the right. One thing as a tow pilot, you always need to absolutely confirm that the guy that's coming off of tow is off. So some glider, the 222, it's very obvious that it's gone. I mean, it's blatantly obvious. It's a big boat anchor. But the L23 and not maybe a little less than the L23, it's fairly obvious. It's a heavy glider too. But anytime you're towing anything that's single place, especially like the 126, the 126 is basically it's the lightest thing one person could fly that has a fixed wing. I mean, the only thing lighter than this, we're getting into like powered parachutes and hang gliders. It is so light that when it comes off a tow, you can barely tell. And the high performance gliders, they pull so lightly, you can barely tell they're even there. And there's also they climb well. So, you're already climbing at almost what you would be without a glider. And then all of a sudden you don't even know the gliders. I've had multiple times where I've looked back and I'm like, oh, it's gone. I wonder how long that's been. Like, oh, okay. Now that was the release. So we'll talk about that for a minute. There we go. There's a release. It makes a nice big snap. You saw that just barely there. You just saw the tow plane just kind of veer off to the left. That's what you kind of want to do. You want to go a little bit left first. Just a nice gentle turn left. Look back. They're not there. Then you can dive. Okay. So from here, this is going to be some introduction to gliding. I'm going to kind of skip this part. Let me see if there's a little bit on the landing. And we'll kind of go over some landing stuff here for a moment. So he's basically just, and we're in, just so you have an understanding of what's happening on the other end of the rope. The glider is going to do a normal pattern just like anything else. The only difference is that they can't hold pattern altitude. So they kind of start at 1100 and they end the pattern, right at the base turn. They're going to end it at more like 900, right? And so they're basically in one solid descent, but it's only like 100, 200 feet. It's not very long. So they're close to pattern altitude. They're also never going to be in a spot where they couldn't make the runway, period, like ever. You obviously don't want to be in that situation. And it's where he is right now. It's actually he's actually fairly wide out. I'd use a much higher pattern in general. I like to be really, really high. You got good brakes. You can put a slip in, and you can kind of pull these in from way up high. Now he's gone from a little bit low to way high, which is good. And now he's just coming in on final. Landing a glider is about as easy as it gets. They're very easy to land. The wheel is directly right underneath you. It's got one wheel in the middle. You don't need to worry about, and we don't, in this glider, high wing gliders, you can do a little bit of crosswind. We generally don't do crosswind corrections if we can help it. With lower wing gliders, now notice here there's a car right next to him. I don't know if you can see it or not. There's a car right there. He's landing next to it. That can happen. Don't like to encourage it, but he's landing in the glider. You got to land. You know, just be safe and know where he's. Don't interfere with him. But that was, you know, that can happen at Richter. There's a road that runs right. It's a public road, runs right by the runway. Okay, so we've seen a little bit about how the gliding works. We've seen a little bit about how the aero towing works. I just kind of wanted to, we're going to kind of dig in now to more of the salient stuff around operations and how we operate. So one of the things that they do at Richter, and I think this is a great idea. I think Ron probably came up with it years ago. We don't fly a straight out departure because it's too dangerous, believe it or not. There's actually a house at the end of the runway. So he actually requires that requests and wants the tow pilot to make a right turn halfway down the runway. It's more like 2/3 or 3/4, but it's right after you're airborne. We make a nice quick turn. What that causes it to do is so this turn right here means if something bad were to happen at 200 feet, we don't need to make a 200-degree turn. So if you look at it, the first version on the left, you have to make more than 180-degree turn to get back. Oops, sorry. I clicked it. Shouldn't do that. So if you have to get here, you got to make more than 180 turn first, and then you got to make another whatever the difference is. So typically that'll be, if it was 45s, it'd be, you know, something you're on the order of like 245 degrees or something. You're getting up there in the number of degrees. Or if we've already made this turn here, this is actually under 180 degrees if you look at it carefully. And so this turn right here, you could make this much lower than you can make this. And in a glider, we use 200 feet above ground as the kind of default safe. So between liftoff and rolling on the runway to 200 feet is considered our kind of like straight zone. If anything happens, wherever is in front of you is where you're gonna land, period. Within, it's a couple, 30 degrees left or right. You can do a field to the side. You can land back on the runway, obviously. And in a lot of airports, a bigger airport, if you have over about 4,000 feet of runway, landing back on the runway is very doable. I mean, straight ahead. I mean, we're talking, you'll be in the air in 2,000 feet. You'll be at 200 feet by 3,000 feet. If you had a problem right there, pull the brakes, land right there. These gliders land in astonishingly short distance if you really wanted to. The 222, I think you could probably do it in about 50 feet. If you really wanted to, it'll land real fast. But it does have some, obviously pavement is longer, heavier gliders are longer, so things like that. But you can land really short. So the point of this is we make this little button hook right here, and it makes it a lot easier to get in if there's anything, if we do lose a rope early. In my career, I've done many 200-foot rope breaks. I've done some on purpose. I've done 150-foot rope break, not on purpose, and still made it back. It's very doable, but you have to train for it like it's an activity that it just happens. Something goes, the minute that rope, or the minute you lose sight of the tow plane, the minute the rope breaks, you know exactly what you're going to do. It's a 45-degree turn immediately, and you put the nose down, and you stay in. You basically keep your airspeed. It's kind of the basics. So I'm going to kind of pause for a second. Are there any questions? Does anyone kind of want to? There's something that somebody's been holding on to. Okay. I don't hear any, so either my audio is not working or I think it is. Okay. So when we talk about airspeeds for towing, these are general airspeeds these are never exceed speeds. These are the high end. So on the high end, so for Blahnik, it's 93 miles per hour, 81 knots. We don't have any L-13s around that I know of, but if you do, it's 76 knots or a little lower. The 233 is 85 knots, and I believe the 222 is similar. The 126, which is a very small glider, 83, and ASK 21 is 94 knots. That's what this is right here. So it's important to understand the speed the glider needs to fly. We don't generally operate with wide ranges, of glider performance, but it does happen. So once or twice a year, we'll get a really awesome day. And some of our members have their own ships, and some of them, they could potentially be carrying water. That's actually, they're basically adding ballast to the glider. I know that sounds very counterintuitive, but when the weight of the glider shifts the polar, and it allows you to fly faster at a better part of the glide polar. So what it does is you're giving up some of your climb performance to fly a little faster. And when you're doing competitions, that's the difference between getting first place or getting 5th place or 10th place. So it can be a big deal in a competition. Generally, for recreational gliding, even with a competitive ship, they almost never carry water. Even just if they're just going to go up and train, it's very rare they carry water. It's really only when they want to train on a really, really good day and they want to get that experience of flying a heavy ship, because it flies totally different with water. As you can imagine, we're not talking about a little bit of water here. This is you're doubling the weight of the glider. Some of them can go more than double their weight as water ballast in the wings. So they can fly way, way different with water. And so yeah, the point of this is, I'm going to show a video here again. This is kind of a scary video. What happened? This is in Utah and this is a very high performance glider. He's full of water, and he didn't tell the tow pilot, that he needs to be towed at a certain speed. So what happens is he is going to be flying way below his comfortable speed. And I remember when I said originally that tow pilot has a higher wing loading, which means they can get off the ground earlier. This is a scenario where, because he has a lot of water and he's a high performance glider, he actually doesn't have as high wing loading as the tow plane. The tow plane can actually fly out climb the glider. And so you're going to see that happen here in a second.
Hello, Joy. Bravo 4. Full water. This is my first day flying E5.
Look how far back his stick is. That's almost all the way back.
Joy, 5 more knots, please.
That was him asking for more speed.
Okay, land straight ahead.
So yeah, that's just kind of a quick outline here. The thing to notice here is just how far back.
Land straight ahead.
Right here, notice how far back he's got to keep that stick. He's almost all the way to the stop. He has almost nothing left. So it's important as a tow pilot to recognize what's behind you and think about what do I need to do to keep this safe.
And Cap has L23s, ASK21s, and then we have a couple of clubs that we partner with that have 222s and 233s. So we do have several different speed ranges there.
Yep, and we got some high performance gliders as well that like to be towed a little faster. The HP18, this is an HP18 right here, by the way. And the one of our members has a discus too. That also wants to be towed a little bit faster. The Lebel tows a little easier, faster as well. Although it doesn't need it, it's just nicer. It feels better. It has so little drag that when you go a little faster, it adds more drag and you don't get quite so much slack rope. And slack rope is what happens when, if you can imagine, if for any reason the glider, if the glider picks up some energy by either pulling up really hard or it gets into a thermal that the tow plane didn't get into, or the tow plane slowed down for some reason, the glider can actually get more energy than the tow plane, and the rope actually starts to come back at you. So what happens is you make it makes a big bow in the rope, and you have to be able to handle that. So that's part of the check ride, is part of your form, form 70-5 G ride would be to demonstrate a slack rope. The L-23 does it great. So it's a great platform to demonstrate that with. But those are things to consider, things to worry, things that we're worrying about as a tow pilot and as a glider pilot.
Yeah, I had one tow last season where we developed a huge slack rope. I was in the glider at the time. We were just about to enter a turn. The tow plane got up to about 80 miles an hour or close to, so he sped up, starts the turn, basically slingshot me around it, and then he realized that he was going too fast and slowed down, which then got me to where I essentially caught up with the tow plane, and that was not a fun place to be.
It's definitely eye-opening. I'll tell you that. And the first time you get it, it'll be you want it the first time to be with an instructor pilot in the back seat, for sure, which is what we do. So I talked about this before in that video we were watching, but just to go over it one time, when the glider releases, you're climbing again. So all of a sudden you pull the release, and all of a sudden you're going to feel it come up, especially the L-23 and the 222. You're going to turn left, but don't turn left like this guy did. There's a video of this one too, where I couldn't believe how hard he turned left. He turned left and went straight down. It was like aerobatic maneuver. Don't want to do that, obviously, for a number of reasons. You want to get down, but you don't need to get down that hard. So one thing is you turn left and you look right. It's kind of counterintuitive. We do have mirrors, and we do have I think Sam's done an interesting job with setting up cameras, which are very cool because it has a nice wide view, and you have a great shot of the glider. So you have it's actually works very well. Hopefully we can get that kind of operationalized, because it's very helpful for both ground operations and when the glider releases, knowing they're gone. But if you turn left and look right, so turn left, look right, and you should see the glider there, or the glider going away. You're turning left, he's turning right. You look over there, and okay, there they are. You're looking out the rear in the 150. You're looking out the rear baggage window in the back, and he'd be right there. You obviously reduce throttle to the top of the green. So the bottom of the green, which is around. It's on the 150. It's about it's about 1900 RPM, I think.
Yeah, so that.
Yeah, it's something like that. I'm not sure what it is in the 182, but it's bring everything to the bottom of the green on the 182.
Yeah, and then on the 182, you also close your cowl flaps.
Correct.
So you'll be towing with the cowl flaps open the entire time. And then what you're trying to do is maintain some heat in the engine. So you close the cowl flaps once you bring the throttle back.
It's kind of trying to prevent some shock cooling, but it's going to happen. You went from you're asking every single horsepower from that engine to 10%. It's like 2 seconds.
The other thing is you're also going full throttle. So in the 182, we do a maximum performance climb the entire time. The POH does not restrict that to a certain time frame. So those of you who are checked out, like a GA8, for example, said you can only do maximum performance for 2 minutes or something like that. A 182 doesn't have that restriction. But if conditions are good and you're not on a really super high density altitude day, you can drop it down to a normal climb and still have a reasonable climb rate. That's what you're aiming for. When we did our first O rides here a couple of weekends ago, it was probably in the mid 50s, and we were getting 1,000 foot per minute climbs at maximum performance. So it was pretty easy, just drop it back down to normal climb, and you're still getting 800 to 900 feet, and it was plenty.
So one thing I like to do, this is just a little trick that I like to use, which is to just take this, because we're going up and down a lot, and it's very just to be precise about what you're doing. If you take on the 150, I'm not sure about the 182. It's probably similar, but it's probably a slightly different amount. Just take the trim wheel and go from bottom to top twice. So take the bottom of grab it at where the trim wheel intersects the panel once, twice. That's 120 knots in the 150, almost guaranteed. And so that's kind of a good descent speed in the 150. And then once you get in the pattern, you just reverse it, top, bottom, top, bottom. Now you're ready to land. And you have the trim set exactly set for takeoff, which is where you want it. And for landing, it's very close for landing, so it's good enough. Then just don't touch it otherwise. That's kind of a general rule, but it works very, very well. So another thing that one of the things we want to think about when we're towing is the rope. It should always be on your mind. It's very easy to get complacent. You're flying a lot. You may be doing. We've had days where there's 20 operations. Very rarely have there been the same pilot flying all 20. But I've been there when I've done it by myself to 15 or 16, and it does happen. And you get tired and you get complacent. You get very, this is just the same thing every time. Always got to remember that there's a rope behind you and you need to have fuel. Those are the two things you just got to remember all the time. That rope is we use a lot of different sizes of rope. The longer the rope, the further down the bottom is going to go. There's a heavy weight. The ring itself is a heavy weight on the end of the rope, so it's going to pull it down. And remember there's kind of a weird thing about the physics of it, but it's not like it looks straight, but it's not quite straight, and it actually bends at the bottom at the end. So when you get really long ropes, it's actually way below. So the short ropes will tend to stay closer behind you. So if we're at a 100-foot rope or 150-foot rope, it'll be basically 30 to 40 feet below you. But when we get into those big 300 feet rope that we use for cross country, that could be like 100 feet below you. It could be way, way below you. And that's something to keep out for. There used to be a electric power line that ran across Gardner. I don't know if any of you folks remember that. If you're landing to the south, I believe, no, to the east on the paved runway at Gardner, there used to be a power line there. Do you know why there's no power line there anymore? It was a tow pilot. They wrapped around it, and it caused the power in Gardner to go out for an evening. So watch out for power lines. And let's see. So that's it for on the rope side of stuff. One thing is it's very easy. One thing I've seen kind of happening, pilots that are they've been doing it a long time, they forget about certain things. And one of them is that these are not typically we don't have high performance gliders. That's not a normal thing. We normally fly the 222 and the 126. Those are kind of our garden variety. They cannot be, they literally, you can actually, as a tow pilot, you can tow them to someplace that they can't get back to the field from. So if you took off and just went straight, down the runway, you can actually take them out somewhere where they can't possibly get back. So it's very critical that we do this pattern, and we recommend it. This is just an MSA kind of guideline for the tow pilots. Take your dogleg turn, do a regular crosswind, do a downwind, and then go right across the field. Typically anywhere between the end and the middle is fine. And then you just turn upwind and go. Now, usually if you're going to a 2,000-foot tow, this is usually enough. This one turn right here is good enough. But if you're going to 3,000 feet, you're just going to repeat this wide pattern around the field. And also, in general, think about what the wind is doing to the glider. It's very easy as you're towing to drift downwind. You just go with, you're not really paying attention, and we're just going in a general direction, and that's fine. And there's clouds over there. There's no clouds here, but there's clouds over there, so we're going to go towards the clouds. Well, that's great, but you got to make sure that the glider can get back to the runway. And there has been we actually had an issue a couple of years ago where that actually literally happened. The tow pilot literally took the glider pilot right to the edge of what he could possibly get back to the base from, and he had to beeline it straight back, and he didn't quite make it. He actually landed a little bit short of the runway. So just things to keep in mind. These are just things we talk about and make sure that everybody's aware. We talk about things, not because they're not always because we're so smart and we figured them out ahead of time. It's because something went wrong. I talked about this a moment ago. I'll kind of talk about it again. As when we're towing, it's I wouldn't say it's a pure, obviously I don't expect tow pilots who aren't familiar with gliding and soaring conditions to understand where to tow, but it is really helpful to know that there's certain spots that aren't so great to tow. If it's a beautiful day and there's just big puffy clouds everywhere, these are likely going to have thermals under them, especially if they're flat. See, that one right there is flat. That spot of that cloud is flat. And this is probably a great day for soaring. And so, generally you want to kind of stay underneath the flat clouds, and avoid the big blue holes. We call them blue holes because there's no lift under a blue. And on a day like this, if there's blue, there's no lift. The lift are underneath the clouds. So if you're just going to tow through the blue holes, just be wary, because especially if you're towing away, like you're towing out away from the clouds, and you're getting near the release, think about where that pilot wants to be. Every glider pilot wants to release and lift. They don't want to release in the middle of a big blue hole, because that just means they're going to spend the first 10 minutes and 1,000 feet. They only have 2, just trying to get to lift. So things to watch out for. We'll try a little bit, kind of wrap this up with some of the risks. I want everybody, and it's important to understand that towing is a relatively risky operation, as aviation is concerned. It's not something that you should do. You should never, ever tow anybody that's inexperienced or underprepared. And what I mean by that is, you are, by definition, you are putting yourself at risk, because as a tow pilot, you can get it. The glider pilot can get you into situations you can't fix. You could be Chuck Yeager, and there's nothing you can do. He's going to take you down. The glider, you have a little, the thing on your airplane that keeps your pitch where you want it is very small as an aerodynamic function. It's your horizontal stabilizer and your elevator. That is a very small device relative to a glider wing. A glider wing can put that anywhere it wants to, depending on where it is on tow. So what I mean by that is, if the tow plane and the glider pilot are right behind each other, operations are normal, everything is good. If he's down low, you actually can pull the tow plane up and you'll stall, and eventually the tow plane will stall. It always typically will stall before the glider. And so then that kind of gets into the corrected. But if he sits too high, you can pull your nose up and you can go into the ground. So these are things to, always, he can actually overpower your tail. So things to keep in mind. And as an instructor, as a glider instructor on the other end, and with students and people who are taking their evaluations, it is a very critical thing that they absolutely never lose sight of the tow plane, period, ever. Losing sight of the tow plane is an immediate release, always. And it's not you can wait a second or 2 if it's a bumpy day, but that's it. 1 or 2 seconds. If I don't see the tow plane, you're off, because you just don't know where it is, and you're damaging. You're putting the tow plane's safety at risk, and your own. One more thing is, the complacency is definitely the biggest factor for issues and things that happen. Accidents in towing, and accidents, especially the towing side, they happen because you're not paying attention. You get kind of numb to it. You're doing the same thing over and over again. When you do the same thing 12 or 15 times in a day, it gets very tedious. It's the same exact operation over and over again. And the things you need to focus in on are things that, what's changed. Is the glider the same glider pilot as last time? Did I get a different glider this time? Is something different? Because we've had a lot of issues. The only real issues we've had are when things have been out of normal. Normal operations for us are very predictable. Super predictable. You got to, the instructor pilot is a lot of time knows what they're doing. The tow plane that's very easy to fly, or a glider itself that's easy to fly, and a tow plane that's very easy to fly. Normal operations for us are very safe. Where we run into issues is when we've got a guy on the glider end who flew a couple times in the spring, and he's back in the fall. He hasn't flown since, and he's in a high performance glider, and he doesn't know what he's doing, and he gets in trouble. That's where we tend to see issues. And as a tow pilot, we need to recognize those as being, oh, this is a guy who hasn't flown a lot, or I know this is not like the 222. I need to be ready, and you need to be as a tow pilot. it's important, especially at critical phases, which really is takeoff. Takeoff is the critical phase in a tow plane. You need to be ready to pull that release without really thinking much. If something doesn't smell right, doesn't look right, just pull the release. That's what it's there for. It's there to save you, and it's there to save the guy in the glider. So, always keep that in mind. So, obviously weather, winds can shift. We will fly the tow plane, and we'll even land the tow plane in a downwind. That can happen. That's all normal stuff that occurs for us. We're used to it, but maybe the winds get bigger, and you want to make sure you're paying attention to that. There's a point where you need to think about, well, what should I do next? And always I want to hear, the thing I'm looking for. And the other thing, honestly, the biggest thing is fuel. It is very easy to forget how much fuel you have. It's so easy. I've done it a couple of times, and you look and you dip the tank, and like, wow, that's too low. Because, that's not what it should be. I'll admit it, I've done it. And because you're doing the same operations, you're over this airport all day long, you're doing the same operations. It can happen. I've never totally run out of fuel. That's never happened. But I've gotten below into the reserve that I wanted to keep. And it's there, obviously, lessons learned, right? Okay. And I said it before, I'll say it again. Anywhere below 500 feet, if it doesn't feel right, doesn't look right, doesn't smell right, just release the glider. Don't ask, don't wag your wing. Wing wagging is your signal to the glider that you want them to release. That's a politeness that you do at altitude. That is not meant for down low. Down low, it's just stay safe. If you have a problem, release the glider. I've never once in my whole career released a glider from the tow plane. Never once. It does happen. People do it. It does occur. Generally, it's not a good idea to do it. You shouldn't do it, because what will happen is the glider has the rope on his end, and he now has to worry about a rope that he either needs to get rid of somehow, which may not release. Remember, it's going the wrong way now, so it may not release. And if he can't get rid of it, it's now going to be, it can get caught in his wheels, it can get caught in the elevator, it can do all kinds of bad things. So generally, we don't want to release it just because we don't feel good about it. Again, it really needs to be something more than just, this is bad. I think there was one situation that happened, and actually, I was in the glider. Sam was towing. All of a sudden, I saw something fall from the exhaust of his tow plane. I was at about 1,100 feet, so it was kind of like a pattern tow-ish kind of like something fell from his exhaust. Before he had the opportunity to release me, I released, because I knew that whatever was going on in that airplane was going to be bad. And so, what ended up happening was there was a mouse nest in the muffler. It fell out, and it caused a lot of stink, and amongst other issues. It actually broke the muffler too. But that's the kind of thing where if he had released the rope, I would have been okay with it. I would have almost expected it. I had the foresight to release before he did, because I saw it probably before he knew what was going on. I actually saw, when you see something falling from a tow plane and you're in a glider, just release. That's a bad thing. Whatever it is, if you're at a safe altitude. I think kind of next is to kind of talk about where we do some operations. By the way, I'm going to pause here. Any questions, any comments? Okay. So we fly from 3 different airports in the Kansas City area. Obviously, most of our flying is going to be here at the Midwest. Obviously CAP, we keep our glider L23 here at Richter. Thanks to Captain Smer saying he did get this little G indicator put on here. That wasn't there a year ago. It's really nice to have that here, because I think it's going to help us with getting VFR traffic going through the area to kind of keep their eyes open. We are there a lot of weekends, and so we didn't have that, and it's good that we have it now. The other places, other opportunities for gliding in the Kansas City area, there is a new club it's an old club that's being repurposed as a general purpose club up in Atchison, and they fly a Lark. I'm part of that club as well. KC Eagles is in Gardner. They're a great bunch of folks. They've got good equipment. They have a 150 horsepower, 150 tow plane and a 222, as well as some member provided single place gliders. They've got some great operations there. Gardner is not the best place to operate a glider. It is very busy. Yes, if you've ever been in there on a Saturday morning for pancakes, you know it gets very, very busy. And same thing happens in the afternoon when there's gliders coming and going and towing and activity. It's not an ideal place, and that's my main reason for not using it. Other than, I live a long way away from it too. So, anything else? Great.
So the FAA requirements for becoming a tow pilot are a private pilot license at a minimum. You have to have 100 hours PIC, and in order to get qualified as a tow pilot, you have to have some training in a glider, as I kind of mentioned, so from a CFI-G, and you have to have 3 tows as a solo manipulator of the controls with a qualified tow pilot in the aircraft. So it does not need to be with an instructor. You have to go up with somebody that's already a qualified tow pilot, and you conduct 3 tows. They're satisfied. We put an endorsement in your logbook that says, yep, we accompanied them for 3 tows, and they're now officially an FAA endorsed tow pilot. For CAP, though, there are some additional requirements. You have to have 500 hours PIC, of which at least 250 have to be in single engine aircraft. You have to have 10 actual tows within the past 12 months. That is a training requirement, which in our case is 1 day's worth of towing out at Richter. I mean, we'll do more than that in half an afternoon. And then you have to meet all the other FAA requirements as far as endorsements go. So there is we have our CAP standard 71-1 provides the list of items that a CAP tow pilot needs to be trained on. And if you do the what do I need on ops quals, it will list all of the items. There is an online tow pilot course that has to be done that we recommend doing every year anyway. It's a joint CAP/Soaring Safety Foundation. You have to document your 500 hours, and you have to upload all your endorsements and evidence, your tow log. Once you get to 50 tows, then you can be designated as a tow pilot trainer. So Captain Meacham and I are both tow pilot trainers. We've been doing this. He's been doing it a lot longer than I have, but the tows come up pretty quickly. And we are in the process of trying to get a mission approved to conduct tow pilot training and glider transition training. So as soon as I get those approved, we would have the opportunity to try to train folks. The key difference between the FAA and the CAP training is the FAA, your 3 tows can be actual or simulated. So we can actually go out and in any aircraft conduct 3 tows and call you a tow pilot. We don't do that at Richter. We may do it for somebody who's requalifying, because you have to do that every 24 months if you are not a current glider pilot and log PIC time in a glider. But our training is with actual tows at Richter, because it does behave differently when you don't have a glider behind you. And then the CAP side does require that your 10 tows have to be actual. The 3 to get qualified as a tow pilot can be actual or simulated, since that's meeting the FAA requirement.
And we will do simulated at times. We've done it. We just don't need to. As long as there's you can't tow with 2 people in the glider and 2 people in the tow plane. Just not enough performance. You'll run out. And you can't, but we will tow with 1 person in the tow plane, a single place glider and 2 people in the tow plane is fine. So that's just as a general rule, but we do simulate it as well. Usually with somebody that's brand new, that's never done it before, I usually do a simulated, just to make sure that they don't feel the weight of another plane behind them. What if I mess up? What if I do it wrong? Just so they have an idea of what they're looking at, and then we do the real one.
Well, with that, we're going to throw it open to the attendees for questions.
Hey, Sam, this is Rick.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever had the engine come close to overheating in the 182?
Nope. Well, we haven't done a lot of activities in the, the 90+ degree days. But the few that we have done, I think it still stays below 200 degrees, and red line on that is about 250, if I'm remembering the gauge right. So that is one thing you do have to monitor as you're towing. If you're doing maximum performance, high density altitude, slow tows, there's just not a lot of cooling air going across the engine. Is you do have to monitor the oil temp and adjust accordingly. But so far, I've not noticed that during any of our tows, even on the hot days. It's been performing pretty well.
Okay.
Is there a CHT on the 182?
Like every single time you.
I know there's an EGT. I don't think there's a CHT.
That tells you a lot more in that regard.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. And Colonel Meacham, or Major Meacham.
One more down,
Captain.
Captain.
Please don't give me another raid. I don't want it. I don't want it.
Will you be doing this training again in the fall? Because I'm about 420 hours, so I'm short through the fall. Will you be doing this again, this training?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we're like I said, we're in the mode of recruiting pilots, and so as we get a list of folks that kind of need it, there is a little bit of quote unquote ground school that we have to go through if we're learning as through the CAP standard. Stuff like how to file a NOTA when you're operating an airport that doesn't have a glider system. We do talk about other emergency scenarios like landing with a glider under tow, something that we try to avoid at all costs because it's not easy to land with a glider behind you. But we do talk about it. So there's we will be putting this on as we go forward and hopefully start to develop our pool of tow pilots a little bit more.
And this class, I mean, this is an informal presentation. This is not a formal prerequisite to any kind of towing operation. That's something we do totally different. We do that anytime. If you show up,
yep.
We'll go through it. No problem.
Very good. Thanks very much for the class. Appreciate it.
Yeah, very good.
Anybody else?
Hey, Sam, I got a question for you. Is there a need for CAP glider pilots? I'm short of 500 hours as well, but I'd be interested in flying gliders. I don't know what's required for a private pilot. And then also, is there funding under CAP to do a transition from aircraft to glider?
Yes, we do need glider pilots to get your transition training from powered to glider. It's 10 solo flights and a check ride. And while you're getting those solo flights, you typically meet the minimum hour requirements. And I think on average, it's about 15 to 20 dual flights before an instructor will sign you off, but that your mileage may vary. Unfortunately, there is no funding for the transition training itself. But for example, at our club, we charge $15 to the members for a tow to 2,000 feet and $10 an hour for the glider. And the instructors donate their time. So it's about the cheapest flying that you are ever going to do. CAP can't even come close to that. We'd have to be up and down in our 182 in about 6 minutes to get our rates down that low for the tow. So if you're interested in a glider rating, I'd recommend coming out and taking a look at one of the clubs here in the area and seeing about doing it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to throw out ballpark numbers at you, but I think anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000 is basically what I would budget for a transition. Even that I think is a little bit generous. It's not much, and you're gonna have a lot of fun. So it's the bang for the buck on getting your glider rating is very high.
Yeah.
It's a fun.
And the club you can tow for at 100 hours. So there is that. The 500 hours is strictly for flying as a tow pilot in a CAP aircraft.
And I'm one of the few instructor pilot, check pilots for gliding in the region. We have a couple more now, which is great. We got Brian Jones now as well, which is really awesome. But what I can tell you is that if you get your glider rating, if you get your glider transition and you have your glider rating, private glider, you'll have to do a Form 5, just like you would for your powered rating in a glider. It is not as rigorous as a powered, because we don't have to go as much stuff. You're basically just showing me that you can operate safely. It's basically retaking your private pilot glider. If you can take a private pilot glider, you can pass Form 5.
Yeah, but and if you're doing transition training and you're doing a check ride with a DPE, that can be your flight portion of the Form 70-5.
So you get a Form 5 right from that.
Yeah. So then a check pilot would just work with you on the ground portions of it. Yeah, definitely invite you out to Richter at some point when it's nice out, and kind of give soaring a try.
And what CAP needs glider pilots for are O rides, because we always can use more glider pilots for O rides, and it's I think that starting O rides in the glider is probably, I no doubt about it. It is way better than starting O rides in a powered airplane. I'm going to be biased here. I've done both, plenty of both. But the glider stuff, it's just more visceral. They're there, they're touching it, they're on it. They feel like they're connected to it. It kind of goes back to, this is how you should learn how to fly. This is how you should learn how to fly, as in a glider. So.
Thanks.
Okay, well, I think that's about all we had for tonight. Thank you all for joining the first breakout session of the 2021 Missouri Wing Conference. Hopefully we answered a few of your questions. If you've got more, please feel free to contact either Captain Meacham or myself. This video, they are recording this presentation, so the links will be sent out and should be able to share with folks that weren't able to make it. We're looking forward to a good glider season. We already got off to a fairly early start, and then the weather kind of rolled in a little bit, but the first one's always the hardest one to get out of the way. After that, it's we're looking for, ironically enough, we're looking for hot days and bumpy skies. But that's kind of the best glider days. So I'm sure we got plenty of those coming up through the summer. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and hope we'll see you out there sometime, and have yourselves a good night.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.